The newsday continues here on One News Now. I'm Riza Diaz. The government is set to kick off the COVID-19 vaccination drive for children aged 5 to 11 years old tomorrow. Let's talk more about this with infectious disease specialist and pediatrician. Dr. Benjamin Ko is joining us over the phone this evening. Dr. Ko, good evening.
Hello, magandang gabi po, Riza.
Doc, magandang gabi. First off, gusto po naming makuha ang inyong opinion, your sentiment on, again, vaccinating ito pong age group from 5 years old to 11. Do you think, Doc, this is timely or we could have waited for further assessments? Kinakailangan pa po ba yun?
Well, the vaccine is already available and there is emergency use authorization approval. This is already approved also in other parts of the world. So I think it is time that it's very timely that the Philippines has access to vaccines for this age group. We have to remember ito yung age group na mataas po ang probability na magkaroon sila ng multi-system inflammatory syndrome. And it is this age group that is at highest risk. It is a complication you get from developing COVID, even if the patients have mild or asymptomatic COVID in the beginning.
Doc Benjamin, there's a petition to cancel the drive, and the petition would state na ito pong stage ito is experimental and unconstitutional. We'd like to get your thoughts on this.
Well, being experimental, I don't think it is appropriate to use that word because it already has emergency use authorization. One, two. The clinical trials have already determined its safety and efficacy. So we already know data that, and that's why I'm saying it, that patients children from 5 to 11 years old who get vaccinated are at 91% lesser risk of developing the MIS-C, or the multi-system inflammatory syndrome, which we see in children in this particular age group. So there's a higher protective efficacy for this vaccine. That's one. Two, being unconstitutional, I don't know. I'm not a legal person, so I cannot give my opinion regarding its unconstitutionality. But I would feel that if you withheld appropriate treatment being available or preventive measures being available to people, then that would be unconstitutional as well.
Then, Doc, with that being said, what else can the government do? What do you think the government can do to improve information drive and to further ease the vaccine hesitancy among parents?
Well, I think the Philippine Pediatric Society and the Pediatric Infectious Disease Society of the Philippines will have a media briefing, I think sometime next week. And it would be good that everybody stay attuned to the briefing that is going to be provided by both the PPS, the PIDSP, and I think the PMA will want to chime in as well. It would be nice if the Department of Health would be around so that they can answer questions on the legality and any legal issues that surround it. But for now, I understand that this age group this is not mandatory. This is not something that you will force people to do. And having said that, then I guess for me, the parents still have the option to discuss any issues that surround them regarding safety, efficacy, and any other questions they may have regarding the vaccine.
Doc, can you explain to us, especially to the parents that are watching, what could be the possible side effects? Should kids experience something? Which one among those that will be experienced would be considered serious? And which ones would be, let's say, needed for hospitalization already?
Well, any anaphylactic reaction, when you say anaphylactic, that means that develop a sudden allergic reaction to the vaccine. Would be one that will require hospitalization and attention, but that is similar to adults. As a matter of fact, if you look at the pediatric population, there are less side effects there are less systemic side effects compared to adults. And most of the adverse events that occur in children are usually local. So at the site of injection, it is painful, there's a little swelling, just like any other vaccine that is provided in kids, a little fever, yon.
Doctor, we also get your insight on another matter, the COVID-19 treatment that is currently under study, like the molnupiravir. What's the latest on this?
Molnupiravir is available now as emergency use authorization also for patients who are at high risk of developing COVID, and they're high risk of developing severe infections due to COVID. So there is already an EUA that is approved for its use. Usually ito yung mga elderly, those that have comorbid, those that that are unvaccinated, and then they get COVID. Molnupiravir is available for treatment of COVID infections. Now, there is another study that is being done, and this is the post-exposure prophylaxis. This part of the study looks at whether if you get exposed to somebody who has COVID, can you take the drug so that you don't get infected? But it's under a clinical trial now. So the approved indication for now is that if you have COVID, then you are a good candidate to receive molnupiravir, especially if you're at high risk of developing severe infection. But it is not yet approved as post-exposure prophylaxis. There are 2 centers that are doing the clinical trial for the Philippines as part of the global trial. And those 2 centers are Quirino Medical Center and Asian Hospital and Medical Center.
A final matter, Doc. How about the country's planned shift to a COVID-19 endemic approach by the end of the month? What are your thoughts on this?
I guess everybody has a different take on it. To me, I don't think it is time to move into a period of endemicity. And an endemic phase is quite a long phase. That means that we must see sustained decrease in transmission, and that there should be no variant of concern that we would see in the next couple of months before we even move into an endemic situation. It's very difficult to say, all right, we have lower cases, we had Omicron, it's mild, and therefore we're now endemic. No, it's a different story for that, because we really do not know how the virus will eventually behave, particularly with the high transmission rate.
All right, thank you, Doc, for sharing with us your time and your insights this evening. That's pediatric infectious disease expert, Dr. Benjamin Ko. Now, the National Vaccination Operations Center says around 500,000 children aged 5 to 11 are registered for vaccination so far. In yesterday's Laging Handa briefing, Center's co-lead Dr. Kizia Rosario explained that many of the registrants used only ball pen and paper instead of going through the digital registration. Now, out of the total registrants, only 1,000 children are expected to be vaccinated against COVID-19 on the first day of the rollout. But Rosario said the program will be expanded to the Calabarzon and other regions eventually.
Sa ngayon po, basically kasi hindi lahat nga nagsasubmit ng ating registration kasi hindi siya nagiging mandatory. Ngayon around 500,000 po yung nakikita nating numbers, at yung nagsasubmit pa lang sa atin is yung mga nasa urban areas na kasi sila lang yung mga may kapasidad to do digital registration.
Europe is heavily dependent on Russia's gas supply. With a Russian invasion said to be looming over Ukraine, how hard could a war between 2 countries impact the energy-starved continent? Let's find out in this Bloomberg Quick Take.
Russia has historically been European Union's largest gas supplier.
European energy is closely linked to the conflict in Ukraine. Here's why.
Everybody now is watching what type of sanctions could hit Russia if Russia really decides to invade Ukraine. Russia could retaliate using energy, and actually about a third of all gas that Europe consumes comes from Russia nowadays.
So this has traders and analysts on edge, and Vanessa says they see three possible scenarios of what can happen to European energy in case of Russia invading Ukraine. The first one is the most positive, in which Russia doesn't cut supplies to Europe, Europe keeps having a mild winter, and LNG vessels keep arriving at European ports, which has so far helped Europe overcome its huge energy crisis. The second scenario would be a more negative one, in which we would see Russia cutting supplies, but Europe would still keep having a mild winter, meaning that demand for natural gas used in heating would be limited. The worst case scenario is the one in which Russia cuts supplies to Europe, and Europe has a cold spell, meaning heating demand would increase while supplies would lower. That would be the worst situation Europe could face, which could end up with drastic low levels of European gas supplies, causing real problems to energy markets. But how likely is Russia to just go ahead and cut supplies to Europe?
So most people I talk to find it very unlikely that Russia could really cut all energy supplies, even in the case of a potential war. That could hurt Russia's image and reputation as a reliable partner, what could make Europe to strengthen and just diversifying its energy supplies away from Russia. And everybody now is obviously looking and considering what are the options that could actually make Europe more independent from these geopolitical tensions that can emerge really anytime.
A question that some analysts answer by saying Europe has no alternative, that the volume of gas the EU needs can't be replaced by one supplier without redistributing deliveries to other regions. So it would require a massive effort from a number of suppliers to diversify Europe's energy dependence. A good example of why this is complicated is by looking at the way US is supplying LNG gas to Europe. And together with other nations, it's helping displace dependence on Russia. But even that measure isn't guaranteed to last. If China's appetite for gas reawakens, those LNG tankers will quickly abandon Europe and head eastward. So diversifying is not easy.
We are already experiencing high natural gas and electricity prices all over the world, especially in Europe. And we are seeing already inflation rates accelerating, industrial production being reduced. We are seeing tensions escalating between Ukraine and Russia that all can mean this crisis can get even worse.
Let's now take a quick look at today's other top stories. A number of bar takers have been disqualified in this year's exams for allegedly violating the honor code while taking the test. The Supreme Court says some deliberately entered testing centers without disclosing that they had previously tested positive for COVID-19. These or there were also those who smuggled mobile phones inside examination rooms. Unioil Philippines says oil companies in the country are expected to raise pump prices again for the 6th straight week. On Tuesday, diesel is set to increase up to 1 peso and 20 centavos per liter, while a 1 peso and 10 centavos hike is expected for gasoline. And Pinay golfer Bianca Pagdanganan finishes 41st in the recently concluded LPGA Drive-On Championship. Pagdanganan had come back from a slow start, but mishaps on holes number 13 and 15 mismind her bid. Now, nonetheless, Pagdanganan will look to improve even further as the tour takes a month-long break. For more updates, visit News 5, the Philippine Star, and Business World Online. Visit our website, onenews.ph, for more in-depth analysis. You can also catch One News on Signal Play app. Register for a free account now at www.signalplay.com and stream One News live anytime, anywhere. I'm Riza Diaz. Mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines. We are One News.